We are a policy research institute based at Sacramento State University, and we do a lot of work on all of California higher education, but for the most part on the completion agenda, we're focusing on the community college system. And because we are in the state capital, and because my degree is in public policy, we are firm believers in the power of the policy lever. So we are always looking for ways to connect the data that we look at. We get a lot of cohort data, student level data from our chancellor's office of our California community colleges. So we've been looking a lot at the progression, the intermediate measures. We've come up with our own framework building on the intermediate milestones, correlating them with student patterns of enrollment. And we're always looking for ways to connect the patterns that we're seeing in the data, completion and progression, to state policies. So our ultimate goal is to try to get a state and system level policy environment that is more supportive of the work that the colleges are doing and need to do more of to help students complete.
This is a strange time in the economy and in California in that regard. Is there an example of the policy change that you might be seeing will have some impact in the near future to really have an effect on where we are now?
I can give you an example of one where we had a very direct impact in the near past, which is kind of a higher bar than we even usually hope to achieve. Usually we want to just at least contribute to raising issues on the agenda and getting them looked at. I'll give you two examples. One of them was transfer. We have a very cumbersome set of transfer policies that was mostly built on local institution to institution articulation agreements, different general education patterns in our two university systems. We have, when you multiply 112 community colleges times 23 state universities times 10 universities, we had a huge mess. And a lot of difference in the lower division major requirements. So students might transfer and they might have their units, but they weren't ready to be juniors. So we actually studied some lessons from other states, and we put together a report called Crafting a Student-Centered Transfer Policy for California, and it actually was the basis for new legislation that passed last year. So that's about as influential as we, more than we ever expected to be. Another example, we've been raising a lot of issues in past years about our system and state policies around assessment, placement, prerequisites for college readiness issues. And we have a policy, so this is an area there's been a little bit of movement in, and in the future, to more directly answer your question, there could be some movements in making more system. We have, every college gets to have its own different regimen of assessment and placement, and we've been arguing for years that sends very mixed signals and unclear messages to high schools and counselors about what it means to be college ready in the community college. It depends on which of the 112 colleges you're going to. So there could be some movement, has been some movement towards having more standardized assessment instruments and placement policies. And then prerequisites, we have a policy that makes it so cumbersome for colleges to institute prerequisites for college level classes, not within the math and English sequence. They can do that, but in other words, to be proficient in college level reading and writing before you take, a history class, something. And so our systems board of governors just enacted a small, but it's, in our context, it's a win, change, making it a little less cumbersome, allowing, not even mandating, but allowing colleges to use content review to establish prerequisites as opposed to statistical validation. So we are hoping, and we were asked to prepare some materials for the Board of Governors, and we wrote some things on that, and we were working in partnership with the faculty senate, the academic senate leadership for that one. So we're not always on the same side that they are, but that was a good development. So we're hoping that more colleges will be able to set prerequisites so that students are ready for the classes when they take them, and we think that's going to, you know, that could help with the completion agenda. We're one other thing. We're working really hard right now. We're working really hard right now on the whole issue of outcomes-based funding or performance funding. And there is a task force that our legislature put in place through legislation that our chancellor has a student success task force. And the task force has 5 external members, and I'm on that task force. And then I was assigned to work with the vice chancellor at the system office to work on the subcommittee of the task force on financing whatever student success plan they come up with, and whether or not performance funding is going to be a piece of any financing plan that they come up with. Very controversial, and we're...
I'm sure. Are you looking at what other states are doing and
well,
maybe learn from that?
We are, and in fact we met last week was our June meeting, and we brought Eric Fingerhut, former chancellor of the Ohio system, and we brought Charlie Earle and Mark Mitsui from state of Washington, and they gave very compelling presentations, and the whole room was just, you know, riveted, but then they left, and, you know, the familiar lines get drawn in the sand, and the, you know, attitudes haven't changed too much. But, I mean, it's a challenge, and there are some very valid objections and concerns that are being raised, and so my role is to actually put out, and we turned it into an institute little policy brief that I just gave a little session on this morning, on all of the concerns, the valid concerns that have arisen about performance funding over the many years of its pretty checkered and mostly failed history, and how some of the newer efforts are trying to address those concerns. And so we're kind of going back and forth on that, but we'll see what happens.
Do you want to highlight something that's come out that may or may not produce more efficiency or effectiveness that California might consider, or is it just, it's too early in the work for California to be looking at what's next?
Well, in area, we've been doing a lot of work. I don't know if this answers your question, but we've been doing, turning our attention really to the career technical part of the community college mission, and trying to, I know that there's a lot of national attention now looking at certificates and the kind of proliferation of them, but are they really the ones that are valued? And now that we started counting things, you know, we're counting a lot of things that maybe aren't really going to get us where we want to go. So we're undergoing this effort right now. We're kind of inventorying all of the different, you know, certificates and vocational associate degrees, of which we have very few completions in any of those, and we think in California we're really missing the boat on that whole area. So we're hoping to push forward the issue of coherence and program structure in the career we call it the career technical. I think other states have different names for it. So I think that we're maybe in a good position to advance some of the national conversations on that front.
So just to dig into that, it's that the certificates hadn't been counted towards completion, or were just not completing? Yeah.
Well, I mean, we don't have any accountability that counts much of anything, but certificates are counted. They're listed on their accountability reporting system, but there's no consequences. There's nobody uses that. And when you don't pay much attention to fields of data, they don't get very accurate and very useful. And then just the whole, nobody's talked about until recently the importance of program structure, program design, and matching programs to local and regional needs, really. And so we're finding we've just got hundreds and hundreds of programs, and what we're doing is we're inventorying enrollment in those programs, and we're linking them to completions, and we're seeing, do we have all of these certificate programs that, nobody even takes, or if they take, they don't complete. And we did put out our most recent report, really documented the very low level, I think, of our entering cohort. Something like 3% of them earned any certificate at all, and 5% earned a vocational associate degrees. We're just not, we haven't been valuing that. We haven't been paying attention to that. Our system and our legislature is most concerned, all they want to know about transfer rates. And I think now that the national conversation is really starting to, I don't know if a shift, but expand into really recognizing the value of workforce-oriented credentials, certificates and applied associate degrees, we are raising that issue and kind of pointing out that, there are a lot of students enrolling in a lot of these vocational courses, but we haven't valued these credentials. We haven't defined them clearly. We haven't helped students find their way into these pathways. So I don't know whether that's going to contribute to the national discussion, but we hope it will. And I think it's certainly going to push some things to the fore in California.
Where do you see that maybe there could be more alignment with K-12 to the career and technical pathways? Will your work deal with some of that?
It is dealing with that, and sadly, though, the career technical elements in the high schools are being shut down. I just got a call from our reporter last week saying, we just closed a career technical high school in Los Angeles. How is that going to affect college? And it's not going to be a good effect. And we're trying to build, there's some legislation that's not new, and that tries to build these pathways from high school to college. And some of the discussions I've been having reveal, again, the policy. We're always looking, what does the policy do? And there are incentives for it's all individual. This person talks to this person. If they happen to know each other, a high school teacher and a community college faculty, they'll link something that's kind of a pathway, but then that same course taught down the hall by people who don't know each other, there isn't a pathway, and you get these kind of courses articulated that aren't part of a pathway. So I think we are just going to be really elevating this whole issue of structure and pathways, and it's not enough to just have courses. In fact, what one of the things we're trying to do is push a little paradigm shift in our college system, and I think it would spill over to their interactions with high schools, away from, it's very course-centric. It's not program-centric. It's courses. It's providing access to courses. And, the budget is being cut. Which courses are we going to cut? Well, we'll cut low-enrolled courses. We'll cut courses taught by adjuncts. We'll cut, and we're really trying to get them to think more about program structure. We shouldn't be just providing access to courses that may or may not add up to anything. We should be providing access to programs. And so I think that will help with the very limited and shrinking CTE dollars in the high schools and the colleges to at least make sure that they are programmatic and not just course-based. We have some unique challenges in the student services area as policy affects that in California. We have a lot of constraints and regulations. We have one law that is like the third rail of community college politics in California, and that's called the 50% law. It's, in my opinion, an artificial constraint. It's one size fits all across all of our 112 colleges, that they have to spend at least 50% of their annual operating budget on the classroom salaries and benefits of faculty. So what's that saying is that there's a limit on how much you can spend on student services. And so,
I learned something.
And so,
wow.
Yeah, and so especially our colleges that serve the more disadvantaged populations, where student services are as critical, if not more critical, than classroom faculty, they are artificially constrained and from spending more on the things they know will work, on counselors and tutors and financial advisors, financial aid advisors and all of that. And so now as student success is becoming more of a topic in the system, and then there's a task force, that 50% law just keeps coming up, and we're not quite ready. The people who, obviously the faculty are the supporters of it, and it's the presidents don't like it, the faculty like it, and there've been battle scars for decades. But that's just one example. We've got a lot of what we call categorical programs. They're special line items that support programs for this population and this population and this population. And a group of college presidents has just come forward to our task force with a proposal to consolidate categoricals, give more flexibility to the colleges so that they can provide the support services that students need regardless of which silo and reporting arrangements there are. So we have a lot of policy issues. A lot of them are system policies, not state policies, that the system does to itself, and they could undo for itself, but, you know, there's a constituency protecting every little special program that's in there, so those are the challenges.
Well, thank you for trying to untangle California.
Yeah. And just one final comment, I mean, a lot of times we hear people say that, not that research, as a researcher, I would never say there's not more that can be learned, but there's an awful lot that has been learned and we know what to do, but it's having the will to untangle some of these policies and get the policies aligned with, you know, with what we know needs to happen.